know what? You're doing it for me, and I appreciate it. Okay, so yours is on the desktop. I'm ready to go. Do you know GDOT using slides? Well, I assume they are because Angela called me at 7:20 this morning and mentioned slides. But I asked George for them a few minutes ago, and I don't know if they were already on their way over here or
There, perhaps?
No, table.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can do.
Madam Council President, you doing okay? Say it again? I understand he relies on other people with props and everything else. Yeah.
Good afternoon. It is an honor to welcome you to the subcommittee of appropriations dedicated to transportation and infrastructure. Thanks to the committee members that were able to drive up to this committee meeting. And I do thank you profusely. I will say that we are the early bird that gets the worm. It is important that we get our appropriations underway, and so we don't have the full roster for the full subcommittee yet, but this is who the wonderful committee members that we do have, and it is I am thankful that you are here. We will welcome Commissioner McMurray in just a second. Let's open up in prayer to begin with. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I am so thankful you meet us here. Lord, I pray that you'll be with our trooper that's in the hospital right now. Lord, I pray that you'll give him a speedy recovery. I thank you for living and working in the great state of Georgia. I pray that we'll be good stewards of the resources that you've given us, and give us wisdom now as we consider the things for the state. In your name I pray. Amen. Commissioner, thank you for being here. Let's come on up and tell us. We're going to look only exclusively at the amended budget this go-round, so the 23 amended. And thank you for being here. Thank you for what you do. You run an exceedingly efficient department. You've done a great job, and I would like to publicly thank you for that. As I prayed that we would be good stewards, I often go around the state and talk about how efficient your department has been on taxpayer funds. So thank you.
Well, thank you for those kind words, Mr. Chairman, and it's a pleasure to be before you and enjoy the opportunity.
Could you pull that just a little bit closer to you? There you go.
Absolutely. I just said thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate for the kind words, and it's the hard work of the men and women of GDOT that make all those things possible, and to be efficient and effective with taxpayers' dollars. We take that very seriously. It was good to be with you yesterday and joint appropriations, and today we'll take a little deeper dive into the fiscal year amended 23 and talk a little bit about that. Not tremendous changes there, as I highlighted yesterday, but y'all have got presentations up and you got a handout. What we've done is sort of tableize, and let me pull out the actual budget document. We've tableized a lot of what's in the budget document just for ease of viewing. And we look at what amended 23 is. The base was 2.21 billion with the add of 89.43 million. Brings us to 2.3 billion in state funds. If you look at that, make sure I've got the right first slide. Yeah, I'm on the same one. This is somewhat page 39 of the budget document. Just a little bit to note, the 89 million add was basically interest adjustment on motor fuel, and so that was certainly a good add, and there represents also about a $1.1 billion sort of swap to backfill the motor fuel that wasn't being collected. But it all shows up under excise, which is fantastic. And again, I want to say thanks to the governor and thanks to all of you as approval of budgets recognize the importance of funding transportation when motor fuel was not being collected. So as I mentioned yesterday, we have not stopped or even slowed down delivering projects or doing maintenance during that time. And that was a very popular question I got for many months is, what are you going to do? It's like, everything is fine. Everything's moving forward. So thanks to the legislature and the governor for keeping us whole as we move forward during definitely some trying times. On the next page is, again, a good summary of where the dollars are used. And as you talk about being efficient use of taxpayer dollars, we always like to sort of show where the money goes. And as you can see, the biggest bar chart there at 1.138 billion is capital projects, which constitutes 3 budget programs in your handout. That would be capital construction. That's the big, doing the projects. Capital maintenance projects. That's roads and bridge rehabilitation and replacement, or rehabilitation, reconstruction kind of work, resurfacing of roadways, things like that. And then the other category, which is a very small one, is local roads administration, which is basically a holder for us to work with local governments when we administer federal funds for them. So that big bar is really the capital program, the things that turn into the projects and doing and taking care of. Next is general operations, which actually we've rolled up into 4 or 5 different budget programs. The department's admin, our program delivery office, that's the work that goes into delivering projects. Data collections, which is an office that keeps up with all kind of data statistics and transportation data. It's a federally required function. The planning divisions, we lopped into this operations, and then traffic management, which is lots of things, taking care of traffic signals, the signs, the cameras, maintaining those devices and the like around the state, and managing some offices like permits and things like that. So we lump those just together in sort of the operational category to show you that that represents about 12%. That bar is about 12% of our budget, and I should have said capital projects is 49% of our state budget. So it's always a good notion to show that a lot of the, what the budget's doing. Local maintenance improvement grant program in at 10% of excise, and so that is, again, a much needed program that helps our cities and counties by formula distribution out to them to address their local needs at $209.7 million.
And Commissioner, just to add, that is the most popular thing that each of us up here takes credit for in our districts. Absolutely, you are so very welcome in working on those roads and bridges, so thank you for that.
And definitely the locals, what we call the local cities and counties, have tremendous needs as we continue to see fantastic growth here in Georgia, so good news there. The next biggest bar there is the routine maintenance budget, And this is the budget where we have most of our people, and those are the people that are out maintaining the roadways and bridges of Georgia and doing all the work that's necessary to keep the roads in good and state of good repair. So this is a big budget category. It's 20% of our budget, but again, it's it's repairing guardrails, replacing signs, repairing potholes, doing preventative maintenance as well to keep us from having to do as much capital maintenance. So a big budget category. The next is payments to CERTA. I'll come back to that in a moment. Intermodal is a small piece at 2% of the state budget. Geo bond debt service makes up about 5%, and then there's the payments to the ATL, and I can speak to those in a minute. On the next slide, let me flip over. Again, we've tableized the budget as the budget has motor fuel in every program, and then transportation fees and funds in a different section. We've just tableized it to put all the budget programs down the left column, and then the different fund sources in the second column, and then the changes that get you to amended FY23. So the real change in geo bond debt was it did increase due to some variable interest rates by about 3.7 million for geo bonds. So you see a net increase in bond debt, but the big swap here is just one replacing transportation funds, transportation trust funds. So it was a tongue twister. Which, if you recall, is the hotel fee, the electric vehicle fee, heavy vehicle impact fees, all added together. So we're replacing that was previously going to bond debt, was the transportation trust fund fees, and replacing that with motor fuel. And so what that did was then freed up motor fuel that is then added in the next row down in the capital construction budget. And so you see a $86 million deduct, and then if you look 4 lines down, you see a $86 million add. So it's basically a fund source swap of how debt's being paid from transportation trust funds to motor fuel. So that's really the big difference there. And then also in capital construction, out of the additional overall budget add, $76.4 million is being added to capital construction. The difference between the 89 total add was paying the bond debt. So that's really where part of the big difference is. And then the other change in the budget is that recognition of that local maintenance improvement grant program to be at 10% of excise. So that was a $8.9 million add, which is really good news, again, back to our local governments that those dollars will be distributed out based on this new budget number. So that's really good news. The last adjustment on this is the in payments to CERTA, which is $351,000, and that is recognition now that the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority is being somewhat pulled up into CERTA to fund their operations. That previously was attached over to DCA. It came off the top of transportation funding, and those funds were transportation revenues, but just went over to DCA. So you never saw it on the budget when we talked about it. Sometimes we'd show it and talk to you about it, but now that's just being recognized back into the transportation budget, which back under your purview. So that was the change there on payments to CERTA. And those are the major changes in amended 23. So one, I just want to affirm and say thanks again for the recognition of the full budget as we thought, and a little bit more, which we didn't anticipate, which we're very grateful for. And going to the big things, the capital construction program and LMIG. And that's really what the additional adds where the bulk of the money's going, beside that little bit more in debt service that was being anticipated. So, Mr. Chairman, that's really a quick overview of that. I know there's probably questions and comments, and I'm glad to take a deeper dive. And again, this was a summary, and we can dive deeper into the budget document too, if you so choose.
So thank you, and I'll get us started. I do want to echo the thanks to the governor and his staff. He assured me several times he's going to make us whole. But until you see it in writing, it is so important, and I am thankful that to see this. And he added to, and this was it's very important because transportation is important. Moving people and goods across this great state efficiently, safely, effectively is one of the things that will lead us to be even a greater state to work and raise our families in. So there's a couple of questions I wanted to start off. One of the a recurring theme over the last 3 days in the budget hearings is about recruitment and retention. We heard that a good bit yesterday. We heard that today. We heard that on day one. And so this effort to recruit and retain key people is paramount in us going forward and working efficiently. And I recall that last year we looked at, we actually funded some recruitment and retention monies. How is that effort coming along?
So, yeah, let's thank you for acknowledging that. I was very fortunate last week to be in Washington, D.C. at the Transportation Research Board and be on a panel about workforce and the future of DOTs. I was joined with my peers from Utah DOT, Washington State DOT, and then 2 people from academia, and talking about the workforce challenge that we are all facing in departments of transportation, which is probably no different than most of the economy in general, but it causes us to look at things differently. And how do we address recruitment and retention? And so there's a lot of things that we've done I've been very proud of, and our Brian Robertson, our deputy HR manager, presented to the State Transportation Board yesterday a lot of things we were doing to try to onboard people quicker and recruit them. And the technology is an amazing thing. We're now using Indeed, and we're doing virtual hires, and people can schedule their own interview online. Available slots instead of playing phone tag or email tag, trying to figure out when people can interview. We've seen a lot of efficiency gain to try to onboard. And as I presented yesterday, Mr. Chairman, we got down to 3,600 or dipped below 3,600 employees for a brief period last year, and we're trying to build that back up to 4,000. So the work that you guys did last year was so appreciative of recognizing, as you just mentioned, the need for recruitment and retention of our existing employees, not only by emphasizing it in words, but by actionable items in the budget of putting dollars in our line budget programs that have people in them. And so we undertook an effort starting once the budget was approved through our HR folks to work through looking at basically what would be compensation, classification and compensation efforts of looking at market data, looking at comparable state DOTs, and trying to look at what salaries need to be or what they should be to try to work on the retention piece. As I mentioned yesterday, losing 600 people, we've lost 600 people last year and the year before. 2 years in a row, we were like 600 or 602. That's a huge effort and a huge cost just to onboard people, and then the institutional knowledge you try to get back is just irreplaceable. You just can't get that institutional knowledge back. So the focus was retention. So as recognized in the budget, we went through a class and comp process. We're working through that now. Regrettably, my intention was to fully have that deployed before we even got to January of this year, as the budget became available and when it was approved last year. Part of our challenges we face are in some reclassification of positions. There's a state pay system, a pay grade system that as state employees we are all on some pay level, and it's sort of if you're familiar with the military or and state government, civil service usually is a pay scale with a minimum and a maximum salary range. And what we are doing is looking at jobs, a lot of, for instance, civil engineering, entry-level civil engineering, we need to move them up on the ladder so that the entry-level salary is, they have room to expand once we hire them. Right now, they're on a level too far down. So we're working through that with HRA, which is a subset of DOAS, and then with OPB to try to get jobs reclassified on the pay grade ladder where they are sort of in the middle of a pay grade and not compressed up on the end. So last year with the $5,000 increase, which was fantastic, that pay grade ladder had to be added $5,000 to it. So we've got a lot of people that are on the upper end of a pay grade. We need to move them up. So we're having to work through that process. It's important to us to be able to do that, to get salaries, what we call minimum job worth, basically an entry-level salary, and try to get people there. That helps with recruitment. But as you know, with retention, if you move a entry-level salary up for the person that just walked in the door, and there may be a person with 5 years of experience, and all of a sudden that person's making more than they are, you got to work to get rid of salary compression such that you bring everybody at least to the same place, so that you have equity across jobs at the minimum level. And so as we've done that, we've looked at job series, and the department's very blessed that we have unique transportation titles. There's not a lot of highway maintenance technicians in any other agency, right? There's not a lot of transportation civil engineers in other agencies. So we have some unique positions that have abilities to make career ladder changes so that people can be promoted when they have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do so. And so we had to look at not only entry-level salary, which is very helpful, and I'll come back, let me come back to that, but entry-level salaries, but you got to work with salary compression as well, so that the people that you hire in today don't make more than the people that are already there, or when they get promoted above salary, somebody is a higher level. And so that's the effort we've been doing. I commend our HR folks. It's a lot of work, a lot of market data, a lot of research to get to that point. So, Mr. Chairman, that's where we are. We're trying to get there quickly, and we need to work forward to get that done, because this budget year is half gone, and so we need to get that done sooner than later. But and again, I want to go back to say thank you for the $5,000 recognized in the budget, and the acknowledgement by you in the House and Senate that in those budget programs we've got to focus on recruitment and retention, because losing 600 people a year is just not sustainable. It's just not able to keep up. And as I showed yesterday, our 60%, less than 60% of employees under 10 years experience. So, and I had some great stats somewhere. I don't know where they are. Probably laying on my desk. If turnover. I'll give you one example though. Our heroes, the people that respond when people need them the worst, and they truly call them heroes. Turnover rate there is right about 50%.
Wow.
And so, and our staff is about half of what it should be. But that just to give you that. I mean, that's certainly the highest turnover we have, followed by maintenance, which is probably it depends on what's title in maintenance, but maintenance probably aggregates to about 18-20% turnover. And I think our average tenure there is 6 years or less.
Okay. So that has contributed to a few more questions here.
Okay.
I'll reserve some of my questions to the end. Representative Mitchell.
Oh.
Commissioner, I too want to thank you for the incredible work the DOT does, for sure. But I want to, with the proliferation of electric vehicles, no tax on gas, what are the long-term projections impact to your department as a result? Do we have any long-term planning for that as we go on?
There's an expert on the panel sitting to your right up here, chaired an EV study committee, or co-chaired, so Chairman Jaspers did that. Representative Mitchell, it has an impact. Quantifying and the acceptance that we are seeing accelerating faster than I think what people are predicted certainly can lead to reduced revenues. We do have the electric vehicle fee as part of the Transportation Trust Fund now that basically approximates what state excise and federal excise would be for driving your car. But that's for Georgians. But as more and more people pass through Georgia
That's
that are
right.
buying gas now, there's not a way to capture that. So I think the outcome of the Joint Study Committee, that will be some things that will be debated here in the House and the Senate this session to talk about how do we handle that. But Representative Mitchell, the other thing I'll tell you that some of the early testimony we heard actually gives me a little more concern than the EV is going to have the impact immediately. It's really the hybrid and the plug-in electric vehicles may have a bigger impact to revenue initially than EVs do, as they get so much better fuel efficiency now. People just not are buying gas.
I see.
Most plug-in hybrids can get about 50 miles on a charge, and I think a daily average driver, I'm not the average driver, few of us not average drivers, but it's usually under 50 miles, so they can just drive on a charge and not buy any gas. So that was some of the information we saw from the EIA, Energy Information Agency, and that was sort of the wake-up call to me, is like, we probably going to see a degradation in motor fuel collection just due to the increased fuel efficiency from those plug-in hybrids than EVs. But you look, Georgia's positioned to be a leader in e-mobility, and such great job announcements and industries coming to Georgia. I think you see the I can't say that word. You're going to see more cars, more EVs faster than we probably would have predicted even a year ago.
Yeah. Again, if Chairman Jaspers has a report coming out, I'm sure it's going to be enlightening here, because we even got legislation that we're considering on dropping that would require multi-family dwellings to have an electric charging station. But to see what that will do for our income and what we need it for, and I hadn't even considered those folks who are just driving through. It's an interesting, but as an aside, why 50% of the hero drivers are leaving?
It's one, it takes a very special person to be a hero operator. The work that they do, the men and women of Hero, is just such a point of pride. Think of them as just a half a notch below. They're a first responder. They're not the firemen or the police, but they're there. They're usually the first people there. They see some very gruesome things and crashes, and they're, like I say, they're often the first people there. And it's a hard, challenging job. It takes a certain person to be able to stand in traffic, not next to traffic, but stand in traffic. And it's demanding, it's hard. You're in the weather, you're in the elements.
Abby says it's dangerous.
It's extremely dangerous. We've had heroes hit.
Wow.
We've had a hero killed. And our vehicles get hit a lot, and it's dangerous work. But I'll tell you, if you ask the first responders, they know when we show up and we're in advance with the message signs and putting out cones and flares, they feel like they can do their job more safely. But it's such a hard job, and the pay is low. And that goes back to recruitment and retention. We have to appreciate the dangers of those jobs and pay people adequately if they're going to stay in there. A lot of the people that we have that haven't left are retirees from either fire or rescue or PD, and it's their second job after retirement. And they have lived in that world and understand it. And we're looking too that we can't continue to do the same thing and expect different results. We've got to work on the salary. That was one of the budget items in that budget program, to increase their salaries. We're trying to get there, take some reclassification to up their pay scale, so to speak. And then we were looking at how we onboard people differently. Instead of putting them through a lot of training and then carry them out, we're going to carry them out to make sure that they have what it takes to stand in traffic and work in traffic and see, like I said, they unfortunately see some horrific things and deal with people in pain and injury. And I can tell you, I couldn't do that. When you come upon a crash scene, it's not a pretty picture. So thank you for that, and for acknowledging them in the hero unit.
Representative Mitchell, thank you for that question. I would, the Commissioner deferred to Chairman Jaspers, who did a world-class effort. He did a great job on all of those. We'll let him speak to that, but the commissioner was at each one of those as well. We learned a lot, went all over the state, did yeoman's work. And Chairman, would you like to say a few words about that EV committee?
I just want to thank Commissioner for being part of our study committee. We did go everywhere, Representative Mitchell, and I will, when I get back to my office, I'm going to send you 750 pages of testimony and recommendations for you to look at, and then you and I can sit down at any time and go over it. But we are working on a bill to address exactly what you're talking about, because we have a strong transportation structure and funding model, and we want to make sure we guarantee that its longevity is there. And there's a lot of twists and turns to it, as you can imagine, but we look forward to convincing you it'd be the right thing to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the Vice Chair, Representative Van Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. You know, you're only as good as people around you. You got some great folks around you, really working for you. And those heroes, I had to speak at one of them's funeral. I know what you're talking about. I would challenge, and this is more to the members of the committee, I would challenge you and tell you, take time and go over on a committee day at GDOT at their office. They meet normally on Wednesday afternoon, and the next morning is board day. They met yesterday and this morning. I challenge you to go over there. And I got to tell you, I like committee day better than I do board. Board day is good, but committee day is where you get into the meat of the subject, and they may have 2, 3, 4, 5 committee meetings, and they talk about the different areas in GDOT, and you really get an overview of what's going on. And so I just challenge you to do that, and you can ride with me over there. I try to go most meetings, and it's really interesting. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and you're right. Always hire people smarter than you, and that's what I've tried to do and succeeded.
So, not meaning to get in the weeds, let me ask you one more question relating to the budget, because, you know, kind of getting in the weeds is sort of what we do here.
Yes, sir.
So one of the ads in the track sheet is is replacing transportation trust fund dollars with motor fuel funds. As a general rule, in the past, we first take if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to put words in your mouth. It is my recollection that we often use transportation trust fund dollars first to debt service and free up the motor fuels for our capital projects, et cetera. And I looked through I got to tell you, those that on this committee that did, and Abby did a wonderful job with HB 170 back in the day.
Right.
So I pulled it up today, and I thumbed through it and highlighted some areas where it specifically mentions debt service. So is this an area that we need to kind of revisit, or is this something going forward that maybe this is what it turns into? But as a general rule, if I'm not mistaken, and Abby often can tell when I am mistaken, but I think I seem to recall that's what we used to do.
Mr. Chairman, you're right, and it does stem back to HB 170 back in 2015. As you recall, back then, the effort was to generate revenue for our state of good repair and trying to generate up to $1 billion, which HB 170 has made that promise and fulfilled it, thank goodness. Otherwise, I would not be sitting here today. Somebody else would be sitting here today, sincerely, to talk to you about budgets, which has made a big difference. But at that time, we recognized our debt, all our debt service was higher than it is now. We had what we call a debt reduction plan, basically to pull down that debt. And so when the transportation fees back then, before it became the trust fund, but just those transportation fees, it was easier to put that toward debt then and keep motor fuel in the capital program so you have one fund source. As I showed you yesterday, there's 13 state budget programs. There's 18 federal programs that you have to marry state dollars and federal dollars together. And it was a lot easier just to keep one state fund source being motor fuel to match those federal than having two separate ones where you may have to take two different transportation fee or the trust fund now and a motor fuel to go match one federal dollar. From an accounting point of view, it's a lot cleaner, it's a lot easier for us to navigate, and a lot easier. And when transportation fees were first passed, and I may recall this wrong, I'll look for my legal expert and legislative expert, Josh Waller. They weren't not in the trust fund dedicated, so it was like a state general fund. So you wanted to make sure you expended those dollars in that budget year first, and so that was the genesis and the history of that. As constructed now is just adds some complication from an accounting point of view. But at least there are in trust funds now, so the trust fund is established for that purpose of transportation use.
And there they stay.
That's correct.
Okay, well, thank you. Any other questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, that's a great job, Commissioner Nicholson, as always.
Well, thank you, and we look forward to continue to work with you in this committee going forward. And obviously, we got 24 to get to at some point, but we certainly appreciate you being expedient on taking up 23 and working forward with you. And as always, feel free to call on us for your constituent needs and working with your cities and counties. And it's quite an honor and a privilege always to be before you. Thank you.
You're very kind. Thank you. Ms. Heather Aquino is going to give us an update on ATL.
All right, good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Heather Aquino. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for the state's mobility authorities, so Greta, CERTA, and the ATL. Janine Miller, our Executive Director, is not feeling well today, so she sends her regrets. She was really sorry to miss this meeting, but she's looking forward to being back before y'all to walk through more of the work that the authorities are doing collectively. And then today I'll just focus on walking through the budget items for the amended fiscal year. I will start with the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority. So as the commissioner mentioned, in the AFY 23 budget, as recommended by the governor, there's a transfer of $351,479 from the payments to Greta, which is currently attached to the Department of Community Affairs. And that transfer then moves those dollars to the State Road and Tollway Authority budget. This is to keep all of those transportation trust funds under the Georgia Department of Transportation, since the commissioner is the trustee. And we'll continue to work with the budget offices as well as OPB and the governor's office on this transfer. The next authority is the Atlanta Region Transit Link Authority. You'll see that in the budget for the amended fiscal year, there's no change. But one thing that I do want to just mention to the committee is that we had a statutory deadline of January 1, 2023 as it relates to the ATL branding. And that was an initiative that we were undertaking with the regional transit operators to have the ATL logo placed on their transit assets in the region. And we are happy to report that we were successful in having that done. We want to thank all of those transit operators who really came to the table and worked with us collaboratively. The ATL board passed some branding guidelines so that the operators such as Cobb or Gwinnett now have the ATL logo on their transit assets using the color scheme that they already had for their service. And then for things moving forward, like any unified apps or Breeze fare payment or signage for all of the operators, we have kind of a kaleidoscope that includes the colors from all of those operators in it to really signify that collective work on transit in the region. And then also, as a reminder for the ATL does operate the express commuter service for the region. Trips there are still lagging since the pandemic, but we are starting to see slow increases, which we are pleased with. And then the last item is for the State Road and Tollway Authority. Again, you'll see the other side of that transfer. So the dollars coming from Greta over to CERTA, again, to keep those Transportation Trust Fund dollars all within the Georgia Department of Transportation. And then there's just a change in the program purpose statement to reflect that those dollars are being moved over. The other thing for CERTA that I wanted to mention, now that these dollars from Greta are there, the funds that come over in the appropriations bill are for debt service, for our Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank program, and now for Greta. We do appreciate all the dollars that go to the Transportation Infrastructure Bank program. We currently have an application window that's open, and it closes tomorrow. So we're looking forward. Yep, it opened October 24th, and then it will close tomorrow. And so we're looking forward to seeing all the grant and loan applications that we've received, and hope to award those probably in the May or June timeframe.
Great program, by the way.
Thank you. We really appreciate the funding. And then last but not least, of course, CERTA operates the express lanes, and so we have seen an uptick since the pandemic. In fiscal year 2022, we saw over $25.8 million trips. So we're back on track since the pandemic, and are thrilled with that.
Okay, so I'm sorry, was that it?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
So any questions?
I thought it was, so I was going to ask you a question, right? Like,
Sure.
As I was thinking of, you mentioned the express lanes, and people do use that a lot, and it appears to be pre-pandemic levels now.
Yes, sir.
As you just mentioned. But you indicated that for the buses, we are not back. How below our pre-pandemic are we with bus trips?
We're pretty significantly below, but we're about to undertake an effort to better understand how that return to ridership could occur. We've seen on like the express lanes, just the time that people take to get into the office in the morning seems to have expanded. Everybody wants to go home around the same time. And so we just have thoughts that perhaps the way that our service is operating today could be done differently with all the teleworking and the change in commute patterns. And so we're about to undertake a study to look at that effort to see how we can better align our service to the needs of the people that are actually riding it.
That is awesome. And I was thinking that, so we have this investment in our buses.
Yes.
And with ridership down, we're not fully utilizing that asset that we've invested in. If there could be some alternate uses for these buses, we just did a Go Dogs SEC championship game, and perhaps picking up fans in Athens or in Macon and bringing them to the, I don't know, if we could think outside the box and find a way we might could fully utilize or further utilize an asset we've already invested in. Just something to be thinking of. So, Representative Paris.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. This is just a question of mine. I'm not real familiar. I have an express lane. I have a Beach Pass. So you see on this little sign right here where you've got these numbers, the prices?
Yes.
Can you explain that for me?
Yes. So when you enter into the express lane, the first price that you're going to see on the sign is going to be the amount of money that you would pay to go from the place that you enter to the next exit point. And then the last number on the sign is if from the place you get in to the very end of that system is what you would pay.
Oh, okay.
So you're seeing the shortest trip that you might take
Right,
in that lane, and you're seeing the longest trip that you might take.
Oh, okay.
And if you get out somewhere in between, you would pay somewhere in between those dollars.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I've had other people ask me about that, and then I was kind of didn't really know the real answer, and so I'm glad that you were here today to kind of give me a little bit of clarity on it. Thank you.
Absolutely, you're welcome.
Chairman Jaspers.
I think I'll follow up on your question, ma'am. People do ask us that, in that dynamic pricing. What's the process? I mean, some days you go through and it's $4, and some days it's $8 and $7. Do we have somebody that's constantly, vigilantly looking at the traffic on a express lane or that's determining that? How does that process work?
So it's done via an algorithm, and we have some engineers over at our office that could probably talk to you for hours and hours and hours about how that works. But the long and short of it is during overnight trips, so when we have periods of very low demand, that would be 50 cents per trip. Outside of that, it's 10 cents a mile, and it goes up from there. So the algorithm will look at the traffic in the lanes, it looks at the general purpose lanes, and then it creates the toll rate that you would pay. We do have obviously higher rates that are in the peak periods of the day when traffic is highest, and then kind of when you're not in those peak periods, but you're also not overnight, it's a little bit less, but more than the 50 cents.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, so it's not really actually looking at the density of traffic, let's say on I-75. It's still using an algorithm that uses historical data to determine that?
Based on the traffic, dynamic
Is that
traffic.
how it goes?
Yeah, so the algorithm would look at traffic that is existing when you're driving, but it's also looking at other factors as well.
Sure, thank you.
And I think that Peach Pass thing that you have on your windshield figures out when you're going through, it ups it up another $1.25.
I have felt that at times, Mr. Chairman.
And I would also mention, we do have folks that watch the roadways 24/7, and so they are keeping track of things like if there's an incident in the express lane or an incident in the general purpose lane and it's causing first responders to push people into the express lanes, we'll make adjustments as necessary.
So thank you so much. Any other questions from the committee?
Thank you.
Great job. Thank you. Okay, to members of the committee, thank you for being here. We have been updated. We will, I'll get back with you as soon as we look further into our budget items. But without further discussion or ado, we're adjourned.
Hey, thank you for asking